Asa did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, as his ancestor David had done. He banished the male and female shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. So we have a good king, finally. Only took the third one in Judah for us to get there. No, their Hebrew term, literally round things, probably alludes to dung. Now this would be interesting if this is one of those wordplay kind of things where, like, the words for idol and dung could have been, like, really similar. What's up, cool people? My name is Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright. We're looking at 1 Kings chapter 15. Apologies in advance if I seem a little bit off. My nose has been wacky today. So 1 Kings chapter 15, the general gist of what's been going on is that Solomon kind of messed up and stopped, not just kind of, he messed up and turned away from the Lord to worship other gods, partially because of his many foreign wives. And then his son takes over as king, but then the people ask for him to, you know, rule less harshly, both in terms of taxes and labor, and he's like, nope, I'm gonna do the opposite. The rest of Israel doesn't like that, so then there's a split between Judah and, like, the entire rest of the tribes of Israel. Neither Jeroboam for Israel or Rehoboam for Judah end up ruling particularly well. And yeah, that's kind of where we leave things right now. And I think it said at the end of the previous chapter that this guy is Rehoboam's son, and that he's the next one to... Then his son Abijam became the next king. I don't even know if that's the pronunciation, whatever. So yeah. That's where we pick things up here in 1 Kings 15. So here we go. Abijam began to rule over Judah in the 18th year of Jeroboam's reign in Israel. He reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother was Maacah? I don't know, the granddaughter of Absalom. Oh, really? Granddaughter of Absalom. Like that Absalom? Hebrew Abishalom. A variant spelling of Absalom. Okay, but that... So I think that means it's not necessarily that Absalom. The one that was David's son. Also, footnote there says also known as Abijah. I don't know. Just different potential spellings of the names for the same people. Ancient Hebrew's quite a different language. Didn't even really have any vowels, to say the least. But anyway, so this guy is king in Judah for 3 years. Not particularly long. Verse 3 continues. He committed the same sins as his father before him, and he was not faithful to the Lord his God, as his ancestor David had been. But for David's sake, the Lord his God allowed his descendants to continue ruling, shining like a lamp, and he gave Abijam a son to rule after him in Jerusalem. For David had done what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, and had obeyed the Lord's commands throughout his life, except in the affair concerning Uriah the Hittite. There was war between Abijam and Jeroboam throughout Abijam's reign. The rest of the events of Abijam's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. There was constant war between Abijam and Jeroboam. When Abijam died, he was buried in the city of David. Then his son Asa became the next king. So, apparently not a particularly memorable reign, although it was only 3 years, so not exactly like he had a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of things. But apparently, he was constantly at war with Jeroboam, who was, at this point, still king of the other tribes of Israel. Footnote there. As in a few Hebrew and Greek manuscripts, most Hebrew manuscripts read between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. But this was Rehoboam's son, so, like, it probably just continued. Because why else would it mention it here when we're talking about the next king of Judah? So, yeah, if you're like me and you would wonder about ages of rulers and things like that, I mean, so it mentioned Rehoboam being either at or around 40 years old when he started ruling, and he was king for at least a little while. In fact, 41 years old when he became king and reigned 17 years. So he was 59 when he died, and then his son became king. So not exactly like Abijam was a real young whippersnapper. However, his son, maybe. But we'll maybe read about that in the next section here. So let's continue with verse 9. Asa began to rule over Judah in the 20th year of Jeroboam's reign in Israel. He reigned in Jerusalem 41 years. His grandmother was Maacah, the granddaughter of Absalom. See, it brings that up again, so maybe it was that Absalom. I don't know. Asa did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, as his ancestor David had done. He banished the male and female shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. He even deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother because she had made an obscene Asherah pole. He cut down her obscene pole and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although the pagan shrines were not removed, Asa's heart remained completely faithful to the Lord throughout his life. He brought into the temple of the Lord the silver and gold and the various items that he and his father had dedicated. So we have a good king, finally. Only took the third one in Judah for us to get there. Note there at his grandmother, it says, or the queen mother. Hebrew reads his mother. So compare 15:2. Yeah, so 15:2 says Abijam's mother was Maacah. So but it seems like Maacah had a particular position of prestige or whatever, and she wound up being removed from that position by Asa because, you know, she made an Asherah pole, disobeying the Lord and not worshiping him as Asa knew was right. Note there, Hebrew term literally round things probably alludes to dung. Now this would be interesting if this is one of those wordplay kind of things where, like, the words for idol and dung could have been, like, really similar. I don't know why that's what my mind immediately goes to, but it says it probably alludes to, not saying it's using that word outright. So I don't know. It's, kind of an interesting thing. It almost makes you wonder, because sometimes, you know, in modern days, we'll intentionally kind of combine words at certain times, or, like, you know, make wordplay jokes, jabs, associations, whatever. Or at least it makes me wonder if that's what's going on here. But, I mean, in the eyes of the Lord, let's face it, all these idols are essentially dung. So gets rid of that, burns down the Asherah pole that his grandmother, made, and brings silver and gold items back to the temple that had been dedicated for the use of the priests there, I would assume. I guess because the previous kings didn't care, they had wound up elsewhere. The dedicated items had wound up elsewhere. But let's continue in verse 16. There was constant war between King Asa of Judah and King Baasha of Israel. Or Baasha? I don't know. Baasha sounds better. King Baasha of Israel invaded Judah and fortified Ramah in order to prevent anyone from entering or leaving King Asa's territory in Judah. Asa responded by removing all the silver and gold that was left in the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and the royal palace. He sent it with some of his officials to Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion, the king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus, along with this message: "Let there be a treaty between you and me, like the one between your father and my father. See, I am sending you a gift of silver and gold. Break your treaty with King Baasha of Israel, so that he will leave me alone." Alright, gonna pause there for a sec. So yeah, unsurprisingly, the fighting between Judah and Israel continues. Although it mentions King Baasha, not Jeroboam, which one would assume then that Baasha was the next king of Israel after Jeroboam because of this, given that Asa was the next king after Abijam. So Judah gets invaded by Israel, but then Asa, in response, is trying to cut a deal with the ruler of Damascus, king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus, trying to make a treaty to get Baasha off his back. So it seems like Israel kind of had the upper hand at this point in the conflict between Israel and Judah. As in the Greek version, Hebrew reads, "There is a treaty." Still, sounds either way like there's a desire to continue or make good upon a treaty that had been established before King Asa and Ben-Hadad. I was trying to see the name of the king of Aram here, and it seems like it should be Ben-Hadad based on that wording. In fact, it confirms it in the next verse. Let's continue. Verse 20. Ben-Hadad agreed to King Asa's request and sent the commanders of his army to attack the towns of Israel. They conquered the towns of Ijon, I assume that's a capital I, Ijon, Dan, Abel Beth-Maachah, and all Kinnereth, and all the land of Naphtali. Okay, sorry. Slight tangent. It bothers me when there's like multiple ands within the same sequence, especially if they're not phrased as like the same item in the list. But anyway. As soon as Baasha of Israel heard what was happening, he abandoned his project of fortifying Ramah and withdrew to Tirzah. Then King Asa sent an order throughout Judah, requiring that everyone, without exception, help to carry away the building stones and timbers that Baasha had been using to fortify Ramah. Asa used these materials to fortify the town of Geba in Benjamin and the town of Mizpah. The rest of the events in Asa's reign, the extent of his power, everything he did, and the names of the cities he built are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. In his old age, his feet became diseased. When Asa died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. Then Jehoshaphat, Asa's son, became the next king. Okay, so after this treaty between Asa and Ben-Hadad, things went better. The tide turned as far as the conflict was concerned. Anyway, so then they took the materials that were previously being used to fortify Ramah, and then basically, took advantage of all that, since it was just kind of left. That had been left behind because the tide of battle had turned, essentially, and so then they took those resources and they fortified other towns of their own, instead of it being used to fortify what was apparently going to be a stronghold for Israel. And eventually, after the 41 years of Asa's reign, he dies, and his son Jehoshaphat becomes king. But we're going to hop back over to Israel at this point. Probably, it seems almost like it's trying to do this in order of, who became king in chronological order. So not necessarily chronicling all the events in order like that, but at least putting the kings in that order based on when they started to reign. But anyway, let's continue on in verse 25. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, began to rule over Israel in the second year of King Asa's reign in Judah. He reigned in Israel 2 years. Okay, so Baasha wasn't the next king after Jeroboam. Anyway, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight, and followed the example of his father, continuing the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. Okay, then Baasha, son of Ahijah, from the tribe of Issachar, plotted against Nadab and assassinated him while he and the Israelite army were laying siege to the Philistine town of Gibbethon. Baasha killed Nadab in the 3rd year of King Asa's reign in Judah, and he became the next king of Israel. He immediately slaughtered all the descendants of King Jeroboam, so that not one of the royal family was left, just as the Lord had promised concerning Jeroboam by the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. This was done because Jeroboam had provoked the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, by the sins he had committed and the sins he had led Israel to commit. The rest of the events in Nadab's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Notice it's mentioning Book of the Kings of Israel for those kings, and there's a separate book about the kings of Judah and their history. But anyway, so Nadab basically continued things as Jeroboam was doing, but then he was assassinated by... Now it says Baasha, son of Ahijah. Is that the same Ahijah that was the prophet? I really... It would be nice if it spelled out more of these relationships more clearly. But it's not worded that way, and translation alone, I don't think, can give us a better insight into it than what the original text would have said in the vast majority of cases. But anyway, so then Baasha takes over. It's not getting into how he ruled yet, because that's probably the next section. But Baasha, it does mention Baasha slaughtering all the descendants of Jeroboam. And that wound up fulfilling the prophecy that was spoken against Jeroboam back, I want to say 2 chapters ago, by the one man from Judah that, was commanded not to eat or drink anything while he was there. So, yeah. Or maybe... No, that was from the prophet Ahijah. That was the different thing that was in the early part of last chapter. But anyway, I digress. Where exactly that prophecy came from, I mean, it's good to know. It's not exactly super important for us today. Alright, so let's look at verse 32 and the rest of the chapter here. There was constant war between King Asa of Judah and King Baasha of Israel. Baasha, son of Ahijah, began to rule over all Israel in the 3rd year of King Asa's reign in Judah. Baasha reigned in Tirzah 24 years, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight, and followed the example of Jeroboam, continuing the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. So, whatever he decided to overthrow Nadab for, it clearly wasn't that. Because he just kept doing the same thing and not following the Lord. So I would think then after Baasha, it's going to get into another king of Israel, because he only ruled 24... Well, he ruled 24 years, which is not a real short time. But that was after Nadab, who did rule a really short time of only 2 years. King Asa ruled for 41. So, anyway, actually, the start of the next chapter is going to be continuing with more about Baasha, but that's where chapter 15 ends, so I guess that's where we'll leave it off for now. Okay, so mostly covering kings of Judah in this section, and we've got one good one out of the 3 since Solomon. Not a great ratio, though. And I don't think it really gets much better by the end of all that. But not trying to work ahead and spoil anything for you. So, yeah, at least we've got one, I guess. Meanwhile, the northern kingdom of Israel mostly had the same king. I will spoil the next chapter, though, kind of to give you a preview. That script is pretty much going to be flipped for the next chapter. We're mostly going to look at Israel, and it's going to have some pretty rapid turnover in its kings there. But, lest I get to talking too much and give away everything, that'll do it for this one. Like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos as I post them. Look down in the description to see links on my different social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. So that'll do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.